Nazis were really into meth, basically. They were the first ones to understand that methamphetamine can change the war effort. They basically doped their soldiers. If a soldier takes methamphetamine in the so-called crucial last 50 minutes of the battle, then he can fight for another couple of hours, while the enemy cannot do that.
Do you think that the Blitz would have been, or the Blitzkrieg would have been as successful without it?
No, I mean, there's a clear no, it wouldn't have been as successful. We received injections of vitamins, different kinds of vitamins, basically the same vitamins we take today, but in quite high dosages. And he got them injected, which is a weird way of getting vitamins. But Hitler believed in the syringe. He loved injections because they work very fast, and he was always in a rush because he had to conquer the world. So he can't even wait for a pill to take effect because that takes 30 minutes. And he really liked opioids. That was his only joy in life. Was, getting high on opioids, injecting opioids, becoming confident again that the war would end well for Germany.
Towards the end of the war, there were plans to assassinate him by the British and the Allies, but then they decided to not do it because they kind of realized that he was kind of off his rails. It was more of a benefit to keep him alive to the Allies' cause.
The British intelligence realized at one point in time that Hitler became a wreck and that it would be much more dangerous to have a sane and rationally operating head of the German army. So in a way, Morell is a hero. And he never wanted to be in that position because he was very loyal to Hitler, but in a way he saved the world by ruining Hitler's health.
So I want to talk about your book, Blitzed, and in this book you go deep on Hitler and the Nazis and their use of methamphetamines and other drugs. What do you know about the origin of methamphetamines? How far back in history does it go?
As far as my research goes, or as far as I know, let's put it that way, the first time methamphetamine is synthesized, basically invented, in 1917, I think it was, in the teens of the 20th century in Japan. A chemist called Nagai made it, but it didn't really have a breakthrough. So it was, it existed, but nothing was basically done with it. And that changed in 1938 when the German company Temmler kind of reinvented it. So that's how I know about Nagai, because the Temmler chemist, he researched about amphetamines. He wanted to find a better amphetamine than Benzedrine, and he found out through his research that methamphetamine had been invented, and then he found a new way to synthesize it, to produce it, and that was patented in Germany in 1938. That's basically when it really started.
And if I know this correctly, it was almost one of those things where you could just go to a pharmacy and pick it up, right?
I mean, the Nazis, 1938 had a Nazi government in Germany, and the Nazis were, among many things, also strangely enough, an anti-drug government. They were the first anti-drug government in Europe, or they kind of invented the war on drugs. I mean, the war on drugs also was, executed in America through the prohibition and then prohibition of marijuana, but the Germans really how do I say it? It was at the core of the Nazi ideology that drugs shouldn't be used. So drugs like cocaine or morphine, they were banned, and it was if you used those drugs, people looked down on you. But methamphetamine wasn't considered a drug when it came onto the market. It was a kind of a wonder medicine. They didn't know, the company didn't really know what they should advertise it for, or what doctors should, how doctors should use it. They just realized you take methamphetamine and apparently you have more energy and your mood is elevated. So they thought it's good against maybe depression or if you're lethargic. So it was advertised kind of across the board. That was a time when Coca-Cola became popular in Germany. So this was kind of a German Coca-Cola in pill form in a way. So you had to go to the pharmacy, actually. You couldn't just buy it at a kiosk or you had to actually go. It was a medicine, so you had to go to the pharmacy, but you didn't need any prescription. We could just go in and buy methamphetamine, and we got methamphetamine in a very high quality, I guess. So,
Wow. So they looked at it as almost like a medicine in a way. Did they know anything about the like negative side effects of it at all? Was there any, were they aware of some harmful side effects?
not really. They thought it was a panacea. It was good against everything, basically. And they hadn't studied yet that you might become addicted to it. And I mean, you can't really compare. I mean, you can compare it, obviously, but it's not the same thing as black market crystal meth today, which is also used in a different form. It's usually snorted, right? Like you take a line of crystal meth. That's different than swallowing a pill that was made by the German pharmaceutical company Temmler, which was kind of softer. It was, I think a line of crystal meth has more, you take more of the drug. So the high is different and the stress on the organism is different. A pill of methamphetamine, which was labeled as Pavitine, that was the brand name. It had 2 milligrams of methamphetamine. So it was like maybe drinking a double espresso that wouldn't stop, as an espresso that just goes on for like 6 to 8 hours. And obviously people like that feeling. So they take another pill. So it was different than crystal meth today. And at the beginning, they didn't really think it was a problem. It took actually years for German universities. German universities started to study it. They were, but they studied it with a positive mindset, that they were looking at how great is this stuff. And they found in studies, for example, that it reduces your fear level. It makes you, and it gives you energy. I mean, we know today that it releases, for example, dopamine in the brain. So it does give you energy. Today we know that this energy basically is bought energy and you have to pay it back somehow. You have to regenerate. But I guess if you use it in pill form, you don't have that come down that is so obvious in snorted crystal meth. So there are obviously health risks with methamphetamine made by Temmler also, but it took quite a while. It actually took until 1940, 2 years, until the first critical study of methamphetamine was published by a medical journal in Germany.
So by the time that the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, were they using this substance, the soldiers?
Well, the medicine or the drug, we should probably say drug, it became quite popular in 1938 and 1939. And there was a professor, his name is Rankler. He was responsible for performance enhancement of the German army. And he tried to combat fatigue, because in his theory, the biggest problem for the soldier is when he gets tired. And then when he read the first studies from German universities, that there's this thing called Pavitine, this new drug, the methamphetamine, that actually lets you stay awake for longer intervals, which is what methamphetamine does. I mean, if you take methamphetamine, you're probably not going to go to bed in the next 8 hours. So his theory was, if a soldier takes methamphetamine in the so-called crucial last 50 minutes of the battle, then he can fight for another couple of hours while the enemy cannot do that. So he became very interested, and he recommended it for the attack on Poland. But his superior, Surgeon General, he didn't really understand it, so he said, no, we're not going to stack this officially. But what happened then was that Pavitine was already quite known, and soldiers knew about it. Soldiers were like normal guys. They were, they speak. What helps you in the battle, because they were afraid. They were 18, 19-year-olds, a new war starting, so it's quite scary. So word of mouth was spreading that if you take methamphetamine, you're not scared anymore. You're like more, you can fight better. Basically, you're more agile, and so people took it, but it wasn't officially, it wasn't an official drug yet. But this Professor Rank, because it was his job to supervise like stuff that soldiers were taking, he requested from medical officers to send him reports, and these reports came to him. And his reports were quite positive about Pervitin. They said, yeah, you can actually fight a war better if you're on methamphetamine. So then he, again went to the Surgeon General, and then this time he could convince him. And then before the attack against France, methamphetamine became an official drug of the German army.
Do you think that the Blitz would have been, or the Blitzkrieg would have been as successful without it? Because like that was a crucial aspect of it, is that just like keep on going without rest. Do you think it would have been as successful without meth?
No, I mean, it's a clear no, it wouldn't have been as successful. Probably Germany would still have invaded Poland. It probably would have taken a bit longer. But they probably would have won.
How long did it take, for the people that don't know? How long did it take for them to invade?
Well, actually, the war started September 1st. It's about 85 years ago. And the war was already over within the month of September. So it was a very fast advance. That's why the Germans then called it Blitzkrieg, which means flash, like a flashing. Blitz mean like when there's thunder and lightning, like a lightning war. So because it was fast, it wasn't normal actually. I mean, Poland is a big country, so it was quite a surprise, I guess, that it was so fast. But it was not only the methamphetamine that made the German army superior in that war, in that theater of war. It was also they had better weapons and a better strategy. So it's not only the methamphetamine that gave Germany an edge against Poland, it was also the overall, the surprise attack and stuff like that. But the attack in the West certainly wouldn't have worked at all without Pervitin, because the French and the British armies combined were much more powerful than the German army. They had more men, better ammunition. Their defenses were quite good. But the Germans used kind of a trick, because they went through the eye of the needle, which is the Ardennes Mountains in this case, a mountain range that you can usually not really penetrate with a whole army. But they did it anyhow, because they said, usually it takes too long. You go through this Ardennes Mountains, they're in Belgium, and you have to set up camp in the evening, and by then word of, news spreads that there has been an invasion, and then the British and the French, they were not so far away in the north of Belgium. They could have, come down and basically crushed them, come down from the north and up from the south and crush the Germans in the middle. But because of Pervitin, the Germans were able to actually cross that mountain range in 3 days and 3 nights. And then they were already behind enemy lines, basically. It's why Churchill called it Sikkercut. So this only worked with the methamphetamine. Without methamphetamine, they couldn't have done this strategy, so the war would have been completely different in the West. Maybe they would never have attacked, actually, because the German generals didn't want to attack, because they said, we're going to lose anyhow. Only through this trick with methamphetamine going through the mountains at night, they were able to succeed.
I've also heard you talk about how while the Nazis were doing meth, the French were drinking wine. I think you mentioned that they had like a lot of deliveries of wine to them. What do you know about that story, and how did their wine drinking affect their performance? Because meth is something that stimulates you and keeps you going, and alcohol and wine quite literally does the opposite.
I mean, it's basically a desperate move to give you. Not really desperate. I mean, it's just a sign that there haven't been a lot of drugs available for combat up until that point. I mean, there was cocaine in World War One for pilots, but cocaine's very expensive and obviously addictive. So it wasn't really a drug of choice for any army. The British Army actually banned cocaine. So what's left? Soldiers have been drinking since alcohol is available, which is for thousands of years. Drinking it can elevate your mood and can reduce your fear, but obviously it doesn't really make you a better soldier because your shooting capabilities getting impaired, and it's not really a great drug, but for combat. But in World War One, the French had been using 3/4 of a liter of red wine per soldier per day, which is quite a lot actually. But I mean, wine in France also has mythological status. It's like the blood of France. Basically, it's what they produce, what they're really good at, and what tastes really good. So you can kind of. I mean, fighting a war is a terrible thing, but if you at least get drunk in the evening, it's more fun, it might not, it might be good. So in the First World War, it was kind of good. The French won, and they drank wine. So, maybe it helped them. But in World War II, it didn't help them because, methamphetamine is by far the superior drug for combat. Obviously, you can even be on meth and drink, it's still better than just drink, for a soldier, So the French kind of shot themselves in the knee with their allowance of 3/4 of a liter of red wine. Maybe it stimulated the wine economy, but, doesn't really help you when your whole country's occupied and the wine goes to the occupiers anyhow.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to Hitler, what are his earliest records of his drug use, and what did he take in those early stages of the war?
I mean, Hitler was a teetotaler, basically. He didn't drink alcohol, he didn't drink coffee, he quit smoking quite early in his life because he said, I have to be pure. He didn't have a private life, at least the propaganda portrayed him as not having a love, which was actually not true. He had a steady girlfriend, Eva Braun, for many, many years, and they had quite an intimate relationship. So, but to the outside, she was kept secret. So Hitler was just a symbol, like the pure symbol, just fighting for his people. And in regards to drugs, that was actually true for quite a while. He met a doctor called Theo Morell in 1936 at a spaghetti dinner in Munich. And Hitler's problem was basically bloating and farting. He had stomach cramps. He had the terrible digestion for some reason. I think because he was a weird vegetarian, he only ate carbs, basically. Carbs and sugar. So today we know carbs and sugar is not really good for your digestion or for you in general, but that's what he ate: carbs and sugar, bread and pasta and cake. And so his digestion was terrible. And this Morell, this doctor, was one of the first doctors in the world that knew about probiotics. So he gave Hitler a probiotic in 1936, and the bloating stopped. And he appointed Morell as his personal physician in 36. And Morell was also a vitamin specialist. He gave Hitler a lot of vitamins. So from 36 to 41, when Germany attacked the Soviet Union, Hitler was using vitamins excessively. He received injections of vitamins, different kinds of vitamins, basically the same vitamins we take today, but in quite high dosages. And he got them injected, which is a weird way of getting vitamins. But Hitler believed in the syringe. He loved injections because they work very fast, and he was always in a rush because he had to conquer the world. So he can't even wait for a pill to take effect because that takes like 30 minutes. So he loved injections. He got basically hooked on daily injections, which were mostly vitamin injections. I mean, basically only vitamin injections and some other stuff that was like supplements, we would say today, not really serious stuff, I guess. But in 41, he was sick for the first time since he met Morel. He had the so-called Russian flu. He had high fever, diarrhea. He couldn't get out of bed. He felt miserable, and it was at a crucial moment in the campaign against Russia. And he wanted to go to the military briefing, so he asked Morel to give him something stronger than just vitamins, and Morel gave him an opioid for the first time. So in 41, he received Dolantin, which was a German product, an opioid. And he really liked opioids because they kind of made him feel secure and, put him in a good mood, and also gave him energy, because some opioids, when you inject them, they actually make you euphoric and they don't tranquilize you. For example, oxycodone, which was his favorite opioid, if you inject that 20 milligrams each day or each other day, like he did towards the end of the war, that kind of, it's a very strong high. Obviously it makes you addicted, which he, became addicted. But that was like his only joy in life, was, getting high on opioids, injecting opioids, and, becoming confident again that the war would end well for Germany. So from vitamins to opioids, basically, he went.
So this is interesting. I know you've read lots of records of Dr. Morel, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were forced to keep a journal, like a daily diary. But if you had the ability to talk to Dr. Morel for 30 minutes, what questions would you ask him that maybe he wouldn't write down, or stuff that you want to go dive a little deeper on that you're not aware of right now?
He did actually write a lot down. It's really like he was a writer, basically. So it goes into a lot of details, like words and sentences that Hitler would use. If you read Blitzed, you will get a very detailed picture of what actually went down, which I thought was very interesting, because he's the only person that really tells you how Hitler behaved, or how Hitler went to the toilet even, it's some things you don't want to know, but he writes it all down, because he got very constipated in the end from the opioids, because the opioids obviously have side effects, constipation being one of them. So the stomach cramps came back, basically. I don't know. It's just fascinating, all the records in themselves. I would find it weird to actually confront. I would ask him, I think I would ask him, do you think that Hitler knew that he was becoming addicted? Even though he might not answer this question, because that kind of implies that he knew. I would ask him, did you know that you're making your patient addicted to opioids? And I would be I don't know the answer. Any doctor that gives his patient opioids intravenously every other day must know. Well, today, obviously, we know, but at the time, during the war, Hitler kind of requesting, make me happy, make me able to perform. So Morel, obeys basically the chemical order of his patient, who is also the most, scary man in Europe. You don't want to, at least he didn't want to, get into a conflict that might have ended his life in a way, But I would be curious if he knew that he was, in a way, destroying Hitler's health. How would he feel about it? Questions like this. I would start with these questions.
Now, was he taking any drugs, Morel, or was he completely sober?
It's an interesting question, and I was obviously very interested in that question. And there are photos of Morel, and I showed these photos to friends of mine who have experiences with morphine, for example, and opioids and heroin, which I don't have, but I know some people who have used these substances, and if they look at Morel's eyes, they say immediately he's using morphine. He was a morphine addict, totally clear from his face and how he looks. But he didn't keep any records on himself. He kept meticulous records on Hitler, but not on himself. There's one note that I found where he says that he's shaking so much, probably from addiction also, that he cannot inject Hitler anymore. Like he kind of in one of his diary entries, like my hand is shaking so much I cannot give patient A the injections today. And he's like thinking, should I call my assistant? Should he give the injections? But Hitler didn't allow that. So I'm pretty sure that they basically injected together. Right? That was probably the bond between them, because they were really good friends, and they spend every day together. So if you have two junkies, one of them also has the perfect supply. I don't know if they're like injected in the same room, but maybe I would imagine that they at least shared their experiences or talked about it. So I think that Morell was a heavy user, but I don't have any proof.
Wow. It's funny that he kept records on everyone but himself, pretty much. And so that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, but I mean, if you take drugs, you don't really write it down, you just take the drugs. And if you're a doctor, I mean, he was busy enough with writing down everything that he gave Hitler and other patients. Hitler was not his only patient. He also gave drugs to other high Nazis.
So is it also true that Hitler took all the drugs that the soldiers did, just to see if I can do it, they can do it?
Well, the soldiers basically took methamphetamine, and Hitler didn't really like methamphetamine, or at least he didn't take it, which is kind of surprising. Or he did take it, and there's no records of it. Morell writes about giving methamphetamine to Hitler only 2 times, which is not a lot at all, because, he gives drugs every day to Hitler, and methamphetamine only twice. And the fact that he writes down these 2 times lets me conclude that he didn't give it more. Why wouldn't he have written it down each time he gave it? I mean, he didn't have any problem with writing down. He was just trying to write down what happened. So I think Hitler didn't really like methamphetamine. Because methamphetamine is like the drug for the foot soldier. It just keeps you going. It's not the drug that the king takes. The king takes the opioid, which gives you the luxurious high of. This is why oxycodone has become so popular in America, because I guess the high is an attractive high, while, I mean, methamphetamine also seems to be an attractive high, but it wasn't for Hitler. So you read a lot that Hitler took all this methamphetamine, so it's just not true. So you can read it out. You can read that in Blitzed. I write very detailed about that question also.
So towards the end of the war, when things started to deteriorate, did it happen quickly, or was it like a slow fall? When it comes to just the drugs getting to the soldiers and even to Hitler himself?
I mean, I think the methamphetamine, it created problems within the army, because soldiers became addicted, at least psychologically addicted. But methamphetamine was also always available. The company produced it all the way till the end of the war. You don't need precious raw materials to make it. You can basically make it from you can make it from chemistry. You don't need anything that is expensive or hard to get. I mean, Hitler took a third group of drugs, and this goes back to your previous question. Morell was kind of inventive when it came to producing new hormones. So he invented things, hormone concoctions from like glands of pigs, slaughtered pigs, or livers of pigs. And he tested actually these new, he thought they give you energy, like steroids. Like he kind of messed with, finding new steroids. And maybe they would be interesting, for bodybuilders today. I don't know. I mean, people take weird stuff just to get more energy. So that Morel was into that. Like, what could I invent that gives my patient like the edge? Right? And Hitler was very, interested in new inventions. And there's a record of him saying that if I like the drug, they can be mass manufactured by you, because Morel also had a factory for medicines. And his problem was that his new inventions could not reach the market because it was a war economy in the 40s. So it was not possible actually to go through all the clinical trials for new medicines. So they all had to be put on hold until the war was over. So Morel complained, and then Hitler said, "Yeah, I take it, and if I think it's cool, then everyone can take it." So we kind of override the legal system. And since he was the dictator, he could do it. So he kind of became the guinea pig of his doctor, and then the German people became the guinea pig basically when the leader said, "Yeah, this is fine." And these hormones and steroids and weird inventions, like also like bull's testicles extracts and stuff like that, like to increase like energy level. And I mean, a lot of things, they weren't really properly tested, you could say. Also, the hygienic conditions were not always very good in Morel's pharmaceutical factory. So I think that ruined Hitler's health, and it went quite fast. I mean, it goes down from 1943 to the end of the war. He deteriorates quite quickly because he was quite a healthy guy before, charismatic person. That's why many people followed him. But Morel basically ruined his health, and I think it was the hormones even more than the opioids. I mean, the opioids make you addicted, and they're dangerous because you can OD on them. But like they were still, pharmaceutical products of, for example, the Bayer company or the Merck company. The Merck company made Olcodal, which was later taken by the Americans and remarketed now as oxycodone, but that was a German product. So these were actually fine. I think William Burroughs used heroin until, very late in life. If you have good opioids, I guess it's not, the danger really, the problem is you get addicted and you can OD on them. But what really turned Hitler into like a physical wreck, I think, were all the weird things that he took.
Wow. And I've also heard you say that towards the end of the war, there were plans to assassinate him by like the British and the Allies, but then they decided to not do it because they kind of realized that he was kind of off his rails, and so it was more of a benefit to keep him alive to the Allies' cause. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, Sir Anthony Beevor, who's a great writer of historical nonfiction books, very knowledgeable about also the British intelligence. He's British. He told me that he did research and found out that the British intelligence, realized at one point in time that Hitler became a wreck, and that it would be much more dangerous to have like a sane and rationally operating head of the German army. So in a way, Morel is a hero also. Like he'd never wanted to be in that position because he was very loyal to Hitler, but in a way, he saved the world by ruining Hitler's health.
Wow.
And towards the end of the war, he actually had these thoughts of himself. He's like, "Oh my God, it was me. I'm responsible for the bad health of our leader. And if anyone ever finds this out, Nazis are gonna, they're gonna kill me."
What happened to him after the war? His doctor. What happened to him after the war?
Well, Hitler fired him in late April. He kicked him out of the bunker in Berlin. When he realized that he had become addicted to opioids, he said, you made me addicted to opioids. Get the hell out of the bunker. I never want to see you again. And Morel caught the last plane out of Berlin and landed in the south of Munich, where he had a research lab in a small Bavarian town. And he he was hiding there, and then the American forces captured him a few days after the war was over, and were very interested in him, obviously, because he was the personal physician of Hitler, and everyone was interested in Hitler. They interrogated him for almost 2 years, like captain, made him a prisoner of war. And when they released him finally, he was in very bad shape. He claimed that he was tortured as a prisoner of war, but that's, there's no proof for that. It's just what he said. But he basically died a few months after he was released. He died in a Bavarian hospital with his wife by his side, so he never recovered from losing the war, poisoning his patient, and being in custody in American custody.
No, what was during those last moments of Hitler's life in the bunker? Excuse me. What was going on? What was he? If I know correctly, they were almost out of the drugs he was taking, so he was kind of going through major withdrawals, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery, because Morell does write down each drug he gives Hitler, and in the bunker, he doesn't give him the opioid anymore, but he doesn't write why he doesn't give him the opioid anymore. It's a fact that the British destroyed the factory of Merck in Darmstadt, southern Germany, which was the manufacturer of the opioid that Hitler was using, Eukodal. So in December 1944, the production stopped, and that could be the reason, because probably Morell didn't have like a stash for several months, because he always went to the same pharmacy in Berlin. It was like a pharmacy for the Nazi entourage, for Hitler. The Engel pharmacy in Mitte in Berlin. So he probably relied on, the pharmacy that they would always have Eukodal available, but they didn't have it anymore. There's like one note where he says that he rode a bicycle through bombed out Berlin, riding from pharmacy to pharmacy, like checking out other pharmacies, asking them, do you still have Eukodal? And he didn't find it anymore. So that would be a simple explanation why he didn't give Hitler Eukodal anymore. But there's no explanation why he didn't give morphine, for example, because morphine was still available towards the end. There was still morphine, So he could have given Hitler morphine instead, but maybe Hitler didn't want morphine. Like Eukodal is kind of a designer opioid. So I guess Hitler thought that was fine, but like morphine is like obviously a drug that, he didn't want to take it. He didn't want to take morphine. So, but I still don't, he had heavy withdrawal symptoms. Like he must have been in excruciating pain. Why he didn't take morphine to take the edge off, I have no idea. Maybe he wanted to feel the pain. So it's a fact that he went through, he had quite a bad time losing World War II and being on heavy opioid withdrawal. But I mean, the withdrawal also doesn't take forever, it takes a couple of horrible days and then you're off it, I guess. And he had, things on his mind. So, I mean, these last months in the bunker are just very, very, very extreme. Yeah.
Wow. This is an interesting question. Let's say you were a World War II soldier. Would you rather be on the Eastern Front or the Western Front?
Well, I guess the Eastern Front is the worst front that ever existed in military history. I mean, people were, freezing to death, starving to death, being slaughtered by the Russians. Millions of people died. Millions of soldiers died. I mean, the Eastern Front was hardcore, But it was also hardcore for, the Red Army. The Red Army lost, I think, 20 million, Soviet Union lost 20 million people.
Yeah.
I don't know how many soldiers were among those 20 million, but, most were probably soldiers, or half, So, I mean, the Eastern Front was just a slaughterhouse. The Western Front was still kind of like a normal war, but the Eastern Front was a whole.
Wow. So my last question before I let you go is, if you had a minute with your younger self, what would you tell him? What advice would you give him?
My younger self, like my son or something?
Your younger self. So let's say, like your 20-year-old self. Yep.
Now in my life?
Yes. If you had like a minute with him, your 20-year-old self, what would you tell him?
I think the life of the artist is the best life that I can imagine. And I would encourage my younger self, to basically just go the same path as I have gone. I mean, I would maybe talk about the importance of steady relationships, which is sometimes runs contradictory to the path of the artist, because the artist is a very self-centered, narcissistic, egotistical being. Especially the writer but I mean, the writer tends to think that what he or she writes is extremely important, and it is very time consuming. So, if I would live again, or if I would talk to my 20-year-old self, I would say, look at love, and maybe put more emphasis on stable relationships. Maybe I would say that. But basically, I think writing is a great career choice. I would say, don't stop. If you don't have success, continue. Because I continued and I had success. So I think it's good to stick to it, if you think that you're a writer. But you really have to be convinced that you are one, because it's a very demanding job also. Fun job, but demanding job.
But very rewarding, I bet.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.